That just sets out, for example, on page 10 in 1.1, that the council no longer receives any main government grant. So the revenue support grant has now been reduced to zero, so we don't get any main government grants anymore. Within the executive summary, we do set out that the budget proposals set out an achieved balanced budget for 21-22, and looking at the budget gaps on page 11, that sets out in a table the new budget gap each year. So for 21-22, this report sets out proposals for a balanced budget. In 22-23, the new budget gap would be just over 492,000. And the year after that, in 23-24, that would be a further 292,000. And when you look at that position over the next 5 years until 25-26, that would be a new budget gap of around about 1.4 million, but the cumulative budget gap, so that assumes that those annual new budget gaps have not been addressed in each year, that would total 3.9 million over the next.
Hi, you've reached Dan. Sorry, I can't take your call at the minute. Leave me a message and I'll call you back as soon as I can. Thanks a lot.
Moving on.
When you finish recording, please hang up or press the hash key for more options.
Moving on to section 2 of the report, the leader has already outlined the changes to the budget report since the executive meeting of the 17th of December. I've got the link there to the provisional local government finance settlement, which was issued on the 17th of December. And we've got a table there in 2.2 for page 11 that sets out the core spending power increase. So the core spending power is the measure that the government used to say how much increase in funding do councils have to run their services. That is showing an increase of 2.5% for Southampton District Council. But when you look at the table and you look at the detail of where that increase is coming from, it's not coming from additional government funding. It's mainly coming from an assumed council tax increase within that formula of 4% within that core spending power calculation. You can see there the new homes bonus grant has decreased, so we will get an allocation of just over £1 million in 21-22. And there is a new grant this year, as the leader has explained, the lower tier services grant, which is just over 82,000 for us. And that is to compensate mainly for the reduction in the core spending power related to the new homes bonus payments reductions.
Thank you. So do we have any questions from members on sections 1 and 2 of the report? No, I've got nothing in the, so if that being the case, we'll move on to, if you could move on to section 3, please, Mrs. Buckle.
Thank you. So yes, section 3 sets out the component amounts of funding making up the medium-term financial strategy. And we do set out there that this paper does present a one-year rollover budget in response to the government's one-year rollover settlement. And what I mean by that is the majority of the funding streams which make up our annual settlement, so such as business rates, new homes bonus funding, that has largely been kept very similar to this financial year in the settlement for next financial year. So the government haven't brought in any, they haven't redesigned the new homes bonus scheme, they haven't done things like reset the business rate baseline, and they haven't also done things like introduce negative revenue support grant. Those things have all been deferred for at least another year. So going forward on to page 14, that sets out there in a coloured diagram all the things that feed into a medium-term financial strategy, and some of the key assumptions within the medium-term financial strategy. And on page 15, again, we set out some of the things that have been assumed. So, for example, in the middle of page 14, we have predicted a very modest business rate pooling gain of 125,000 for 21-22. And we are assuming that business rate income could be down by around about 3%. We have also calculated what we think the council's share of the collection fund deficit for council tax will be for the next financial year. Normally the collection fund for council tax is in surplus. This year it's predicted to be in a deficit position, and we've calculated that deficit and our share as the district council of that deficit to be just over 30,000. So that figure has been factored into the budget calculations. We know that Rural Services Delivery Grant has been increased, so it's been increased from 81 million to 85 million nationally. So we have factored in our new allocation of that. And the Rural Services Network are lobbying very strongly that they feel that figure, that 85 million nationally, should be a lot higher, more like 130 million, taking into account going back to the settlement funding analysis work which was done back in 2013-14 around the what it does actually cost to deliver services in rural areas, and a lot of that additional funding, when it was recalculated back in 2013, there was a certain element of damping within the system, so not all of that additional money came into the system. It was gradually phased in, and certainly we will be lobbying along with the Rural Services Network for a higher allocation of Rural Services Delivery Grant. I have set out there as well assumptions made about the pay award offer. So a 1% pay increase has been modelled, and that equates to 70,000. The government has implied that it expects local government to exercise restraint about pay, given the wider macroeconomic climate. And then the final point, which I would like to emphasise on page 15, is around we haven't made any changes to the council's income streams for next year. So we haven't reduced any of the income targets for things like the ferry income, car parking income, planning income, as a result of the pandemic. So we've not reduced our income targets in the base budget for 21-22. We do know that the government's income compensation scheme for sales fees and charges, that is going to be extended for the first 3 months of the next financial year. So we will be able to claim that compensation for April, May and June. But after that, there's been no confirmation of any compensatory income compensation scheme from the government after the first 3 months of the next financial year. In the last budget monitoring report, there was a recommendation which was approved by council that the fourth tranche of COVID funding which we had, which was the 100,000, went into a COVID earmark reserve to protect against future COVID losses in 21-22.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Are there any questions from members on section 3? No. In that case, we'll move on to section 4, and with section 4, we'll deal with it under the subheading. So first of all, we'll start with the section dealing with business rates and negative revenue support grant, which is, if we could deal with that first, that's on page 16 and page 17.
Chair, before you move on, Councillor Sweet has asked to raise a question in the chat box.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Sweet.
Yeah, sorry. I just wondered if Lisa could also refer to the section numbers as well as the page numbers in the report.
Yes,
I'm sure.
Because I'm reading the agenda via a different device, which hasn't got the page numbers.
Yes, certainly. Apologies for that, Councillor Sweet.
No. Thank you.
So section 4 of the report goes into the main funding streams around business rates, council tax and new homes bonus. So section 4.2, we set out there the position with regard to negative revenue support grant. So we have had confirmation from the government that that is not going to come on stream in 21-22, which is really, really good news for us. And the table in 4.5 of the report sets out our business rate income projections, which we've built into this budget report. So, for example, for 21-22, we have assumed business rate income of just over 2.3 million. And then looking forward into 22-23, that's the point that we think the negative revenue support grant may come on stream, and we think that will be phased in gradually. So we're predicting a reduction in our business rate income of 270,000 for that negative revenue support grant, and over the next 4 years we think that that could go up to as much as £500,000. Now that's all part of the business rate baseline reset. So what that means is any growth that we've had in our business rate base, when the government do the reset, that growth gets lost. That's the same for all councils nationally. The baselines are reset, and we then start again as such in terms of growing our business rate base. Just to explain what negative revenue support grant was, this came from the 4-year settlement which started back in 2016, whereby the government basically said that it was our share as such of the funding reductions, and because our revenue support grant had already gone to zero, our further share of government reductions had to go into negative grant territory. So basically what that meant is that we wouldn't be able to keep all of the business rate income, which was our share. We would have to pay some of that back in what's called a negative government grant. So it's called negative revenue.
Meeting on the phone,
but basically it's our share of the further reductions in the settlement funding, but that has been deferred. It hasn't come on stream last year or for the next financial year, so we're very grateful because that's quite a significant amount for us. For example, in 22-23, we think it will be at least 270,000 of business rate income that we will have to repay to government in the form of negative RSG. Moving on to section 4.6, business rate reliefs. What we know is in this financial year 2021, there has been the expanded retail discount and nursery discount. So basically what that means is for businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure section, they do get 100% rate relief, so they don't have any business rates to pay in this financial year. We are lobbying very hard, along with organisations such as the LGA, the District Councils Network, and as South West Councils, we are really lobbying to ask government if they could also make those business rate reliefs available for the next financial year too. And we've got many businesses asking us, will the business rate reliefs be extended into 21-22? The government are considering that, but they have said that they won't make any announcements on that until the new year. So we are expecting some announcement shortly on that, but we don't know yet whether the government are going to extend those reliefs. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I have a question from Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I just roll back to section 3.6? I think it is. I was a bit slow on the uptake there.
Okay.
Where you've I'm just trying to get it up. Sorry, bear with me. Where there is a budget gap of a balanced budget in 21-22. And then there is a serious budget gap of £500,000 nearest damn it, 22-23. I assume that's due to the new homes bonus or lack thereof. And then year on year thereafter, it's very close to 300,000. My question is how those figures are arrived at. In summary, not in detail.
Yeah, no, certainly, thank you. I think so. Probably the best place to see that is in Appendix B, that sets out the modelling for the next few financial years. That's on page 35. But the vast majority of that £500,000 for 22-23 is coming from the 270,000 reduction in the business rate income that we're expecting from negative revenue support grant being introduced, and that's 270,000. So what we are expecting is that the government will bring that in alongside a business rate reset in 22-23, and that figure could be higher than 270,000. It could be as much, for example, as 400,000, but we think the government will gradually phase it in rather than bringing the whole amount in one financial year. Part of the budget gap also comes from the fact that the lower tier services grant, which is giving us 82,000 of funding for next financial year, that has been said by government that it's only a 1-year grant. So we won't get that money in year 2 in 22-23. So that's another nearly 100,000 of the budget gap, because we've got a funding source next year that we won't have the year after. And also we've got additional cost pressures and savings that are also impacting on that budget gap. But it's mainly those two things: negative revenue support grant and the loss of the lower tier services grant.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, a couple of questions, and like John, I'm going to slightly go back. The core spending, I appreciate that the increase in core spending is, you say it's mostly. I wonder if we could have an actual figure. So the government say they've put up our spending by 2.5%, but actually, if we take out the increase, the recommended increase in council tax, what exactly is the increase or decrease in core spending? And also, could I just ask, how near or far are we with any decision in respect of the business rates loophole, in respect of second and holiday homes?
Yeah, thank you.
How's that lobbying going?
So I'll answer the core spending power question first. That's in section 2.2 of the report. So I've got a table there setting out the core spending power calculation. So we can see that our core spending power, that 2.5%, is mainly coming from a change in, so the 255,000 increase in the core spending power is mainly coming from a 260,000 increase in the assumed council tax. So if you took that 260 assumed council tax out, then your core spending power calculation would more or less be zero. So zero increase or zero decrease, because that core spending power increase of 255,000 is mainly coming from the 260,000 you can see on the assumed council tax line. You can see the other things that are causing the changes. The reduction in the new homes bonus is more or less offset by the lower tier services grant. So if you took that out, the assumed council tax, it would more or less be a standstill position, so a net nil position on the core spending power. With regards to the business rate loophole, that's something that the leader has been lobbying very hard on, and our chief executive through the Local Government Association. It has been in the responses to our responses as a council to the comprehensive spending review in September. It was also in the LGA's response and the District Council's network response. We are all responding by tomorrow to the draft local government finance settlement. The deadline for consultations is tomorrow, and the lobbying for the business rate loophole to be addressed, so that domestic properties are paying council tax. It is in our submission to the consultation response. It is also in the District Council network's response, which I have seen, and we are very much hoping that when the government issue their reform of business rates, their consultation is due, the results of their consultation is due to be published in the spring. We are very much hoping that that business rate loophole will be addressed in the government's reform of business rates, which is due to be published in the spring.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just I'm assuming we're covering the whole of section 4. Is that correct?
No, no, we're doing it in subsections.
Okay, so only up to the pages that Lisa's taken us to so far.
Yeah, so Lisa's taking it subsection. Yeah. So
okay,
is your question?
Fine. I'll hold. I've got questions on the next page. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pennington
so
would like to ask a question, please.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Pennington.
I would, yes. With regards to, it's on page 15, the final bullet point there, it does state that no permanent reductions to the council's income streams, and then they're listed, like ferry income, car parking, etc., etc., etc. Now, can any estimate be given at this stage before, and first of all, as to what they may be? You must surely have made some estimates. And also, too, in addition to that, on the same question, presumably, when you get more information, they will be built into the base budget for 21-22. Yes or no?
We are not proposing to build them into the base budget, and there is a rationale behind that, which I can explain. So if we just look at where we are now, where we were at the end of December in terms of our income streams, in terms of planning, for example, we know that our planning income was down about 128,000. In terms of the ferry, we were about 109,000 down on our income target. And in terms of car parking, it was just under 500,000. It was around about 490,000. Now, what we do know is that the government have said that they are going to keep the income compensation scheme for 21-22. And the way that compensation scheme works is it takes your budgeted income, takes off your income received to date, and you get the 75% of, we have to meet the first 5% of our budgeted income, but the government then meets 75 pence in the pound. And the reason why we don't want to reduce our income targets is, one, because we want to keep them really at the pre-COVID levels, so we can keep track of what it was before the pandemic. But our strategy would be to keep those income levels the same so that we can claim that income compensation through the government scheme in the next 3 months of 21-22. But as you say, because we feel it's highly unlikely that we will get the budgeted income levels that we had prior to the pandemic, we do need to have money set aside in what I would call a COVID losses earmark reserve. Now, members agreed for 100,000 to go into that reserve, which was the 4th tranche of COVID funding we have. And in this report, we do know that the government are going to give us a 5th tranche of COVID funding, and our share of that is about 380,000. So what we will be recommending is that 380,000 also goes into the COVID reserve, so that we would then have the best part of 500,000 for 21-22 to address any losses in our income stream for the next financial year. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Buckle, can you continue with the section 4? Perhaps you could flag up where you're going to start from.
Yes, thank you. So we have covered 4.6 and 4.7. So if I then move on to council tax, sorry, I will just say a little bit about the business rate pool, which is in 4.11 of the report. So there was a recommendation to council in December that we remained part of the Devon business rate pool for 21-22. We've done a lot of modelling around that, and we will continue in that pool. That was the recommendation to council, which council approved, and we will be one of 26 pools nationally for business rates. If I move on to council tax, which starts on 4.12 of the report, So the draft council tax referendum principles have been published by the government. The limit for district councils is the higher of 1.99% or £5. The higher of those amounts for us would be £5, and a £5 increase on our current bandee of £170.42 would mean a bandee council tax for the district council of £175.42, and that would be a 2.93% increase. Now, our share of the council tax bill is around about 9%, and that can be seen in the table on page 19 or in 4.13 of the report. So in the table in 4.13, we set out there, so for example, for this current financial year, for 2021, an average bill for the district council was £1,990 for a bandee property, and of that, the council's share of that was £170.42. So that's how much money comes to the district council to provide our services, and it's about 9p in every pound of the council tax that is paid. Obviously, the largest share goes to Devon County Council, and also a share goes to the police, the fire, and the town and parish councils as well. In modelling our collection rates for council tax, we can see that as of the end of November, and this is in 4.14, we've collected just over 74% of the council tax, and that's a decrease of about 1% on where we were this time last year in 1920 before the pandemic. So we have modelled a 1% drop in collection fund rates in this report. And obviously, as a district council, we are responsible for collecting all of that debt. So it's actually 78 million that we collect in council tax on an annual basis.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I've got another question.
Councillor Pennington.
Yes, I noticed, and I knew anyway, that the town and parish councils have no restrictions whatsoever, which I think is entirely wrong, when every other authority does. Now, the thing is that if you look at the table there, they're going up by 10%, or in total going up by 10%. Can we not publish, and so that residents and taxpayers know how much each town and parish council charges and increases, and what they do it on, please? Because I think they're getting away with murder, quite frankly, and everybody else is being penalised in one way and another. Can we not find out that what they are each? How many have we? About 60, aren't we? Can we not do that? Yeah.
Mrs. Buckle, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So as part of setting the council tax resolution in each financial year, you're right, Councillor Pennington, we do have the precept from each of our towns and parishes, and also we know how much that is in terms of a bandee increase in council tax and the percentage increase. We do publish those on our website. They are part of, we no longer put out, and this is a national change, councils no longer, we used to put a council tax leaflet in with the council tax bill that would set out all those parish precepts and the increases. We no longer do that because part of the government regulations is that must all be done electronically now online. So we put that information on our website, and it does show the increase of each individual parish, what their precept is, and also what their bandee council tax is. So that information is there, and we put the link to that page on our website, the actual council tax bill on the face of the bill. And it's actually it's www.southhams.gov.uk, and it's /sh spending. So if you go to that website page, that does show all the town and parish precepts.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, with regards to 4.9 and 4.10, I'm recognising that that loss that we normally have certain amount of loss of council tax not being recovered, that we end up as being a write-off at some point in the next few months. I'm assuming that this indicates that we may have a higher write-off. But with reference to 4.10, it looks like we're going to get compensation. So that 75% of council tax recovery write-off, the reimbursement that we may get, as is suggested there, we don't actually know what the criteria is, so we may not be able to claim it all. Are we going to be kind of about the same as usual, would you assess, or is it likely that we are going to take a further hit? I mean, which is obviously effectively a COVID hit, because that's why a lot of people aren't able to pay this council tax this year. I mean, it can't be, it has to be a kind of coincidence with that. So I just wonder if that was the point I just wanted to raise on that particular issue. Thank you.
Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Yes, the government have come out with what they are calling an income compensation scheme for council tax and business rates. And what they have said is that they will meet 75% of any irrecoverable losses. And we are looking into the details of that scheme. That scheme doesn't look as generous perhaps as perhaps we first thought it was when we saw it announced as part of the spending review, and the reason for that is I think is going to be one of timing. So I think the government are going to say that the majority of council tax over time is recoverable, and I think what they're going to compensate us for is changes in bad debt provisions for things like council tax. So it's probably that they will compensate us for 75% of any increase in the bad debt provision, and we calculate the bad debt provision on things like the age of the debt. Also, we look at some of the larger debts within that bad debt provision as well. So yes, we do know that we've calculated what we think will be our share of the collection fund deficit for council tax, and we think that will be just over 31,000. So it has impacted on our budget calculations, because in previous years we were getting a collection fund surplus of just under 70,000. So there's at least 100,000, if you like, from a surplus position into a deficit position on the collection fund for council tax. So yes, that 100,000 is definitely impacting on us. And when we get to the point of closing down our accounts for 2021, we'll then be in a position to calculate what that bad debt provision needs to be for council tax. And any change from the previous financial year, that's what we think we will get the 75% compensation from the government on. I have to say that as we are sort of 9% of the council tax bill, this hugely impacts on the county as well, because obviously they've got the largest share of council tax, and the other precepting authorities, as well as the towns and parishes.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson, could you make it a further question rather than a further comment, please?
Well, it was really about the whole thing of the parish and town council precepts, and the comment just that was made by Councillor Pennington. I just really wanted to say that I think we have to recognise that some town and parish councils have gone far beyond the call of normal duties to support their residents during the COVID situation. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we look at what may be coming in as their precepts this year. So I just wanted to put that point in, really, because it'd be easy to miss it and challenge some. And it's probably very relevant to the actual response they've given. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Buckle, would you like to continue? I think we're on the collection fund, aren't we, at 4.19?
Yes, thank you.
Right, if you'd like to do that section. One, yes. Can I suggest that you actually do the collection fund, the rural services delivery grant, and the new homes bonus? If you could cover those three, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've probably covered quite a bit of the collection funding that we've talked about, the tax income guarantee scheme. This is the 75% of irrecoverable losses that the government are going to compensate us for. So as well as council tax, that'll work the same way with regards to business rates. So we think we will get 75% of any increase in our bad debt provision. There's a large government return which we have to submit by the end of January around business rates, called the NNDR1, and when we've completed that return, it's at that point that we will be able to calculate some of these figures with regards to the tax income compensation scheme. With regards to Rural Services Delivery Grant, yes, we were very pleased to see that that grant has been increased from 81 million to 85 million, which means our share of that has gone up to 428,000. And as I said previously, the Rural Services Network and all the rural councils are lobbying for that 85 million to be higher, in recognition of the fact that going back to 2013, it was proved how much it costs to deliver services in rural areas. With regards to the new homes bonus, that starts on 4.23 of the report, and I have got a table there setting out all of the allocations. We are in year 11 now of the new homes bonus scheme, and the colours show the amounts for each of the financial years. So, for example, for year 11, our allocation is just over 422,000. That has come from net additions, so growth in our housing base of 425. And that also includes empty homes brought back into use. And we also get £280 for each affordable home. So that's given us an extra 50,000 as well. So that 422,000 that you can see in the purple box there, we don't think there'll be any legacy payments on that. So it won't also go into 22-23. We know that the government are going to change the new homes bonus scheme, so they're going to consult on a new scheme, a replacement scheme, but it is worthwhile knowing that in our modelling for 22-23, even though we know there's going to be no new homes bonus, we have assumed that there will be funding around of 546,000 from either a replacement new homes bonus scheme. Now that's important to know when we look at the table on 4.24. Our allocation is just over £1 million. Within the modelling, we are assuming 746,000 of that will be to fund the revenue-based budget. We've got an allocation there of 200,000 to fund the capital programme. So that would be putting some money into the capital programme to fund basically a contingency budget within the capital programme. And that would leave an amount unallocated of 122,000. Now, we also know that there was an amount unallocated of new homes bonus from this financial year as well, 2021, and that totals 235,000. So those two amounts together, the 122 and the 235, that would give us some funding if we find that in 22-23 we know there's going to be no new homes bonus, but if there's no replacement funding coming from a replacement scheme, that would give us some money to fund the fact that we've already included in our modelling 546,000 in 22-23 from a source, whether it's new homes bonus funding or a replacement scheme, because if we haven't got the money for that, that will increase our £500,000 budget gap for 22-23 to over £1 million, because we've assumed a funding source that we have no certainty will be there. So that's a risk within the figures for 22-23. But if we've got these amounts unallocated from these two financial years, that would give us some comfort that if there is no replacement scheme for new homes bonus and we don't get any funding from that, we would have some money set aside to meet the 546 assumption that we've made of new homes bonus funding to meet the revenue budget in 22-23.
Mrs. Buckle, while you're at it, could you complete section 4 from 4.27 to 4.33, and then the next session we'll go on to section 5?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in terms of any other assumptions, I've already talked about the pay award assumption. And in 4.30 there, we do say that the council is preparing its corporate strategy for adoption in the summer of 2021, and that will set out any additional resource requirements to deliver the strategy. And in terms of savings, I do go on in 4.31 to talk about leisure. Obviously in September, the council considered a report on our strategic leisure options. I can confirm that Mr. Brooke has submitted our bid to the leisure fund, and we've got a provisional allocation there of 160,000. So we've submitted our bid, and that was against the 100 million leisure fund that was announced before Christmas. We've also talked there about the latest revenue budget monitoring position. So that was considered by the executive in December, and that is predicting a surplus for this financial year of 69,000. Thank you
very much. So are there any questions
with regards to 4.32, which has not been mentioned, to collection of garden waste, which is a very valuable service, I think appreciated by many, many people. I'd just like to ask, has any estimates been made about what might be the cost of dumping if that service is charged? I'd like to know that, because it may offset any gains, possibly. And also, a second question with regard to it, would members need to declare an interest before taking a decision if they participate in that at the moment, before a decision is made?
Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I think the question from Councillor Pennington with regards to the garden waste was around fly tipping. Am I right in thinking that was the question?
I think that's right, yes.
Yes. We don't see a pattern of increased fly tipping when there is a charged garden waste service. This isn't something that we're asking members for a decision on as part of this budget process. We're merely flagging it as an option for members for future budget processes. And when we're looking at that, obviously we would. Our head of waste would run some informal briefing sessions with members to explain things around things like fly tipping. In terms of whether members would need to declare an interest, that's obviously a question we can ask the monitoring officer, but this is not something which is for debate today. It's not part of the budget proposals for the next financial year. It is something which would be in future financial years' budget reports. But again, we can take advice from the monitoring officer at that point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just briefly, regarding 4.24 on the amount remaining unallocated in the new homes bonus, the 122,274. I was just wondering whether, you're kind of effectively earmarking that for, the potential gap in 2 years' time. I just wanted, if you could just clarify that's how I see it, or is it sort of basically there it's a kind of a loose pool? Thank you.
My recommendation would be to earmark that, because we have built into our modelling 546,000 of a source of funding towards our base budget that we've, as I said, we've got no certainty we will receive, because the government haven't said what's going to happen to new homes bonus after 21-22. They've said they'll put out a consultation on that, but that is a risk for us. And therefore, in that respect, I think with regards, my recommendation with regards to the 122 and the 235 would be that we have that in the back of our minds as a fallback for if we don't get any new homes bonus funding or any replacement funding for 22-23, because that's a risk in our modelling at the moment, that we're relying on an income source that we don't know is going to be there.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Buckle, could you move on to section 5, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I may bring in Mr. Hawke on this section as well, Chairman, when we get to the end of that to talk about the CVS, if that's okay.
Okay.
So thank you, Chairman. Yes, with regards to partnership funding, we set out there in 5.1 that the total amount of funding that we've got allocated is just over 89,000. There was a resolution in the previous financial year, which is set out there in 5.1 for all of our partnerships. And that was the funding not only for 21-22, but also for 22-23 as well. Going on to, I don't know if this point, Chairman, if I could bring in Mr. Hawke to talk
yes,
about.
Yes, please do.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Hawke, would you like to contribute to the answer to the question? So would you like to, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to add to what Lisa's saying, in terms of the position with the CVS funding, members will be aware that previously the resolution was to fund CVS for 1 year, pending them submitting sort of a demonstration of the impact of their work to the council. That was for the previous financial year, but given the work of the involved of them in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, we paid them the full £10,000 last financial year, without them providing additional information to us. Myself and Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Hawkwood, as executive members, have met with CVS just before Christmas, and we have agreed that they will submit a further submission to us by the end of January, demonstrating the impact of their work. And I think we're confident that we will receive that from them. Just to give members an update on the work of CVS, it's encouraging that they have been successful in obtaining some lottery funding, and that funding is going to be used to further develop the work of CVS and also to undertake a full impact assessment of the previous financial year. So that impact assessment will be delivered to us by the end of January, so that we can be confident that the work of CVS and the work that they're proposing to undertake over the next 2 years is aligned to supporting the council priorities. And I think there is some work that we can certainly, the CVS can support us with in, certainly if we look at our recovery plan. I think, we committed to undertaking a lessons learnt of community groups. Well, CVS is well placed and best placed to undertake that piece of work. So that's certainly something we're talking to them about. And developing our future resilience. I think, that the work of CVS has been front and centre at the COVID pandemic, as I've already said, in supporting those community groups, both existing and new. So long and short, we should receive their impact assessment by the end of January, but we're confident that that will set out what they're going to do that will support the council in the future.
Thank you. Can I remind members that we are going to determine the amount of partnership funding it's item 5 of the recommendation, so there will be opportunity for debate on that later in the meeting. So are there any questions on section 5? If not, I'll ask Lisa, I wonder if you could deal with sections 6 and 7, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So section 6, Treasury Management and our borrowing strategy. As part of the medium-term financial strategy, members have set an overall borrowing limit for the council of 75 million. And as part of the spending review, the government has announced its outcome from the consultation on that. So there were 2 parts to that. They have lowered the interest rate for the Public Works Loan Board. So those are back to the levels that they were before October 2019. And what we have to do now before undertaking any borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board is we have to submit a high-level description of our capital spending plans and financing plans for the following 3 years. Including any expected use of the Public Works Loan Board. So that's a government return that we have to submit through the Delta system. That's something we've always done previously as well. But that's something that we have to continue. And basically the government have said that there are 4 categories really that they would allow for PWLB funding. That's around regeneration schemes or housing schemes or service delivery schemes, or if it's refinancing existing debt. So those are the 4 categories which are permissible now for PWLB funding in the future. Fees and charges, that is a separate report on this agenda, so I won't talk about that very much, but just to say that we have modelled 3,500 income from fees and charges within the overall budget strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No. In that case, we can move on to, if you could cover sections 8 and 9, please, Mrs. Buckle. Oh, sorry, I've got a question. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. In section 6.1, where you're talking about the Public Works Loan Board and the need to put in a 3-year strategy, what are the deadlines for that, and where are we in the process of putting together a strategy?
Yes, so the deadline for that is the end of the financial year, so it's the 31st of March that we have to do that by, and there are several steps that we need to go through as a council before we're in a position to do that. So the first step is to consider the capital programme, which will be a report to the executive on the 28th of January, and then to consider that capital programme at council in the middle of February. And once members in council have agreed the capital programme, at that point we then need to write the treasury management strategy, the capital strategy and the investment strategy, which all go to council for consideration at the end of March. And once those 3 plans and strategies have been agreed at council at the end of March, I then take the figures from those strategies and put those into the government Delta system, and that's the figures that form our high-level spending plans for the next 3 financial years. So there's a process that we have to go through over the next couple of months, but that's all leading up to that 31st of March deadline that we have to adhere to.
Okay, can I just ask a quick supplementary on that? I mean,
yes,
having submitted a plan, is there any process whereby that plan can be incrementally updated over subsequent months and years, or are you committed to it for the next 3 years?
No, we can update those plans certainly on an annual basis. So when we submit the Delta return by the 31st of March, that's an annual thing we have to do. But if at any point during the financial year, members could bring back a revised capital programme and revise their capital spending plans. And then we can notify the PWLB separately that council have agreed a new capital programme, and we can update those figures. So that's not a problem to do at any point in the financial year, but mainly we would try to stick to the once a year that we will complete that on the 31st of March. But if, for example, midway in the year we've got a new capital programme or updated our capital plans, we can certainly just resubmit that Delta return again. That's no problem at all.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Mrs. Buckle, could you now move on to sections 8, 9 and 10, please, of the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in section 8, I set out options for financial stability going forward and the timescales around that. So, for example, in the first section of that table, I've set out the extended leadership team, so all of the heads of practice continually look to identify budget options for members to consider, and things like ideas for income generation and savings or reduced expenditure. And we have got the fees and charges report also being considered today. We are also doing the regular budget monitoring reports, The next one will come to the executive in March, and that'll be very close to our year end. So that will be the last one that we will do before we close the accounts. I also talked there about the asset and accommodation review, and also we've previously talked about charge garden waste, but to stress that that's not a consideration for this next year's budget. That's something for future consideration. In terms of the funding options that I do set out there in Appendix D, we've got the contributions to and from earmark reserves. So all of those can be considered. And we've also got our new homes bonus allocation for 21-22 and use of any earmark reserves as a temporary measure. In section 9, I talk about the capital programme and potential borrowing. So again, we've talked about that quite a bit. Our deadline there is around the 31st of March. And we also have our agreed investment strategy as well. And in section 10, I talk about earmark reserves and unearmarked reserves. We have got a schedule attached to Appendix C, so that shows that our earmarked reserves have a projected balance of just over 10 million, and our unearmarked reserves a projected balance of 1.767 million. And as part of the medium-term financial strategy, members set a minimum balance of unearmarked reserves of 1.5 million. Now, the 1.5 million is the lowest figure, really, that we should ever look to have our unearmarked reserves going down to. Really, we want to be sitting quite comfortably above that level at any point in the financial year, because we are saying that's a minimum that we would ever want to get down to in terms of our unearmarked reserves. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions on those sections 8, 9 and 10? No. In that case, Mrs. Buckle, can you complete the report on the remaining items, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in section chapter 11 of the report, I think the key point that I'd like to pull out there, or there's two key points really that we've previously talked about. 11.1, whereby the government have said there will be a compensation for our income losses from the sales fees and charges government scheme for the first 3 months of 21-22. So our assumption is anything after April, May and June of next year, we will have to meet any losses from our own finances on that. And 11.2, there has been an announcement for government of what our 5th tranche of COVID funding will be, and that is the 380,000 that's set out there in 11.2. We wouldn't receive that money until April 2021. I haven't shown it anywhere else in the report. It may be an idea that we formally put a recommendation around that money going into the COVID earmark reserve, because as we've talked about before, we haven't reduced our income targets for next financial year, but we do need to make sure we've got some money set aside in a COVID losses reserve, so that if our income levels are lower than what we've budgeted, and I suspect very much that they will be, it's highly unlikely that they will be at the levels they were at prior to the pandemic, that we've got some money set aside to fund those losses. And in section 12, I just set out the timescale really for next steps and proposed way forward. Obviously, this is the meeting today on the 14th of January. We've got the executive on the 28th of February. 28th of January. Going on to full council on the 11th. So it would be the 11th of February that the council would set its share of the council tax. And then once we've got the Devon County, the police and the fire precepts, we then go on to set the actual council tax bill, which would be on the 23rd of February. That's the council tax resolution panel. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson, I don't think we threw you out of the meeting, but would you like to put your question?
Sorry, whoops, I think the system threw me out, but anyway, so sorry to come back on this. I just wanted to ask about under point 8, the garden waste situation, whether the opportunities for a potential sale of the material that's collected is included in that anticipated benefit potential profit on actually charging. So, for example, I mean, material that can be used and sold on to somebody to create shredding material. I was just wondering if that had been added in, or whether it was just like, you know, the profit was there despite maybe the cost of getting rid of that material. I just wanted to ask that, if I may, please.
Yes,
Mrs. Buckle.
I may pass that one to Mr. Munnu to answer, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair, with your permission.
Yes.
So in actual fact, the actual garden waste is Devon County's waste. So they are the disposal authority, and I believe that it's their responsibility. I mean, it's something that we can have conversations with them, but it's actually, in terms of garden waste, it's quite low grade in terms of compost value, is my understanding. But it's a Devon County as the disposal authority. They're responsible for the disposal of that waste, and it's their waste as such. We just collect it. I hope that answers the question.
Okay.
So the answer is no, it's not within our gift. Yeah.
And I don't think this features in this year's in next year's budget at this stage, does it?
That's correct, Chairman. It's not in next year's budget. No, it's purely there for noting purposes as something we could consider in future years. Okay.
Councillor Smurden.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested, Mrs. Buckle was talking about a COVID reserve. I apologise if, I mean, you know, there's a lot of figures which are included in this report. I apologise if I've missed the COVID reserve. If I have, could you just give us an update on it? And have we actually got money in it at present?
Certainly, Councillor Smurden, thank you. Yes, the fourth tranche of COVID funding, which we had from the government, that was £100,000. And when we did the revenue budget monitoring report to the December executive, our recommendation was that that fourth tranche of COVID funding, the £100,000, was put into a COVID reserve. That was considered by Council in December and approved. So we are showing that in Appendix C. I've got their COVID earmark reserve, 100,000, and that was subject to Council approval. The next tranche, the fifth tranche, which is the 380,000, I haven't put a recommendation anywhere in the reports about that yet, because that's not money that we will receive until April 2021. So it's money that would come in 21-22. It's as near as we can get to being confirmed, but until that money kind of comes into our bank account, I haven't yet put a recommendation anywhere about what to do with that 380,000. But I think in the back of our minds, we need to bear in mind that we will need that funding really to cover what we assume will be reductions in income targets in 21-22, because 100,000 isn't going to be enough. We will need more than that.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just come back, yeah, I'm very pleased to hear that, and I'm absolutely certain, you know, that's very prudent and that it will be needed. So, can we look upon the COVID reserve as, you know, something which is going to rise up in, you know, in priority, and also as something which we, you know, if we have available monies, surplus money, you know, to which we can continue to add. Would that be correct?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think that would work both ways as well. I mean, if we got to the end of 21-22 and we found that our income levels had recovered, and we'd got more income in, or income levels were back to the levels that they were prior to the pandemic, then we could come back to members at the end of 21-22 and say, oh, well, we've got this money that was in a COVID reserve. You know, it would be members' decision as to what to do with that funding. But I think we couldn't make a recommendation around that until we were really near the end of 21-22 and we could see how next year's financial year had panned out. And similarly, do we need to look to add to that? I think that's a difficult one. We'll keep an eye on what our income streams are doing. I think by the time we get to March, and we take the budget monitoring report for the end of this financial year, again, it's really hard to predict what our income streams are going to do next year. I think that will depend on many things. I think at this point, probably if we have the 380 plus the 100, so we've got the best part of $1 million, $500,000, I think that would probably be enough in the COVID reserve, but we can just, keep an eye on that as we go through the financial year. We are working with a lot of financial uncertainty at the moment in our figures, but we can keep tracking that. And if we feel that we need more in that reserve, then we can come back to members on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodson.
Thank you, Chairman. So item 11.3 regarding the grant to tackle homelessness. I just wondered whether we're going to be able to apply for that and maintain the work that we already are doing on homelessness, whether we expect that grant to be made available to enable us to have a sort of seamless continuation, because obviously that makes a big difference to what work is already done and the value of actually going forward. So I just wonder, and what kind of money do we think we might be trying to apply for out of that grant?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I think that is an allocation that we will actually receive. So I don't think we actually have to apply for it. I think we will get given our allocation from that. And we've had homelessness grant in the past. I think in terms of the amount, it will be somewhere around probably between 130,000 and 170,000. It will be in that ballpark, I am anticipating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask Mrs. Buckle to go through appendices A, B, C and D. If there are any questions on those, can you please put them in the chat box now? Otherwise, we'll move on to the recommendation. Okay, well, I'd like to thank Mrs. Buckle for comprehensive answers to the questions, and thank you very much. That's been really helpful. So,
thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Brazil has asked me to hang on. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to furiously type in. I was just saying. So we're going straight to the recommendation. I was wondering if I could just have an update on the it's in Appendix A, is that right? I mean, Appendix A. So it's the where is it? The economic officer. Yeah, the economy post. Just wondered if we get an update on the work that they've been doing, because there was some debate about what they were going to be doing. And I just wondered if we could have an update.
Chairman, would it be helpful if I stepped in at this point?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Julian, for your question. So there was there was some debate. I agree, and it was clear that the role was the priority for the role was to work with the team to try and access grant funding to deliver as much as we can with as little resource of our own as possible. The procurement for that officer is still yet to be complete. We actually went to the market. We made a decision to get an economy officer who was going to relocate down south from up north. They were a good fit. There was obviously a period of months where they had to, serve their notice, and then right before they were due to start, they changed their mind, which was most unhelpful. Their employer offered them more money, essentially, and we've just gone back out to the market and concluded some interviews 2 weeks ago. So the answer to that question is we haven't been paying for one because we haven't had one, but we will have one shortly. So
okay.
They haven't done anything because they haven't been here. That's not to say that the rest of the team haven't been doing lots to get grant funding. And for example, we submitted a grant funding application for Fusion only 2 days ago. So lots of it going on, but not by that post. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So if we could now move on to the recommendations, you'll see that on the screen that, that our views are sought. The way that I intend dealing with this is that we'll deal with it section by section. So we'll start with little 1, but the preamble to the 5 items will be, and I'll read this out, this is the wording that's been used before, that the joint meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel and Development Management Committee recommend to the Executive to recommend to Council that, and then we'll start at 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So first of all, if we could deal with the first item, which is the proposed increase in council tax for 21-22 of £5, and the rest of the wording is set out on the screen. I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, second.
Okay, right. I haven't anything to say at this stage, so I see that Councillor Hodgson wishes to speak. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, you asked for views. I think this is actually really important. I think we have to keep the council tax in place. It gives security to the district council and those that depend on us to keep providing services. We've got to kind of think ahead and invest ahead to make sure that we can keep our show on the road and deliver the services which have been absolutely, you know, sort of so urgently needed this year. The work that's been done by our officers to be so flexible to help support us through an unprecedented year. I think we do need to ensure this, and I think that the council taxpayers will be very willing to support that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
Yes, thank you, John. Yeah, I'm not quite so sure if the taxpayers will be so happy with this. Let's remember that the council tax is a regressive tax. It's not about ability to pay this taxation. There are plenty of families struggling to pay council tax. All right, the district council's one is only a small amount, is a smaller amount, but there are going to be much larger increases at county and indeed police and indeed fire brigade. I appreciate what Lisa said in respect of closing the loopholes as far as business rates are concerned with second homes and holiday homes. I'm also a firm believer that the government should give us the opportunity to charge double council tax for second homes and holiday homes. Just to remind people that the value of those properties have increased by between 5 and 6% this year. So at a conservative estimate, that's to say that they've made a capital gain in their second and holiday homes in the region of £20,000 or £30,000 this year. What we'd ask them to do is to pay extra council tax because it's fair and equitable that the people with the most should burden the most of taxation. So whereas I will support it this year, this is my final year that I'm going to support an increase in council tax, because I think we are being complicit in respect of how the government is passing the responsibility down to local authorities to have to increase their taxes, when what should happen is the government should be stepping up to the plate and actually doing its moral duty and increasing taxation in a much fairer and equitable way, which it can do, but it chooses not to. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that in this country we give tax breaks for people with second homes, whereas we charge people extra tax who've got a spare bedroom, who happen to be less well off. So I will support this through gritted teeth in order to balance this budget. But the idea that council tax is somehow a good for communities is far, far from it, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Pannell.
Thank you. Yes, just supporting what Councillor Brazil says. Council tax is a very regressive tax. It was brought in a hurry to replace the poll tax, and it's never really been, some of the issues have never really been sorted out, let alone the revaluations that were due to happen. And I feel that what is lacking is that there is no further bans above the existing top rate of council tax, and that I know there has been some talk that this might be adjusted and a new higher rate brought in. I wondered if members feel that we might perhaps lobby the government to increase the number of bans so that really valuable properties would be paying a significantly greater proportion towards the council tax burden.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? So if no other members wish to speak, oh, sorry, Councillor Rowe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank Mrs. Buckle and her team for the way they've put the budget together. And in reply to both Councillor Brazil and Councillor Pannell, well, I think none of us like paying any form of tax, full stop. And unfortunately, we do have to pay taxes one way or another. And I think this budget's been put together, and we do have to have a balanced budget and a way forward. And I think that we have to support the budget, which I will be definitely doing for this year. And we don't know what's going to happen. We're living in unprecedented times, and we don't really know when we're going to get out of the situation we're in now. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, and let us never forget,
Councillor Pennington.
let us never forget that central government, so far as Southampton is concerned, is donating £1.2 million in those new grants that have been formulated. So let's not be always highly critical about central government. They are doing things to the best of their ability, in my opinion.
Thank you. Well, if no other members wish to speak, I think we'll proceed to the vote. Mr. White, I think in this particular case, I'd ask you to go around the members and ask how they wish to vote on this recommendation, please.
Thank you, members. So we are voting on part 1 of the recommendation only at this stage. In alphabetical order, Councillor Abbott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Birch.
4.
Brazil.
4.
Brown.
4.
Brown. Councillor Chown.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Holway.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Kemp.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
4.
McKay.
4.
Councillor Callahan.
4.
Councillor Pannell.
4.
Pennington.
4.
Pringle.
4.
Reeve.
4.
Councillor Rowe.
4.
Councillor Smurden.
4.
Councillor Spencer.
4.
Councillor Sweet.
4.
Taylor.
4.
And Councillor Thomas.
4.
Thank you. That therefore, members, is 23 votes in favour, and that vote is therefore unanimous on part 1 of the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. White. Right, before we move on to items 2, 3, 4 and 5, there is, I wish to propose an amendment. I wonder if you could put that on the screen, please, Mr. White.
1 second, Chair.
The reason the amendment is going at this stage, because if it's carried, it will impact on the subsequent figures. So the proposed amendment, I proposed this from the chair, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Would you like to confirm that you second this amendment?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. So I will exercise my right to speak to the amendment.
So, Chair, can I just confirm, just for process, we're quoting amendments, but actually because this is a new two in effect, this is a recommendation in its own right now.
Okay, right. Okay, so it's an additional recommendation.
Indeed,
Okay.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Right. At its December meeting, Council approved both the recovery and renewal plan and the climate change and biodiversity strategy and action plan, and much time and effort went into preparing these plans, and yet there is nothing in the budget proposal to provide funding for their implementation other than the £400,000 allocated to climate change during last year's budget setting process. The £400,000 has already been allocated. So to overcome the omission, the fact that there is no money in the budget to deal with these important plans, I propose that the Council shows its commitment to both plans by including within the budget the sum of £500,000 for the recovery and renewal plan and £200,000 for the climate change and biodiversity strategy and action plan. I've not been specific as to the particular projects on which the funds are to be spent, as I believe this should be left to the Council at a later date after it has determined its priorities in respect of both plans. So the question is, where is the £700,000 going to come from? So this is set out in the proposal on the screen. There is a proposed addition of £50,000 to the planning reserve, making a total of £187,000. Upon examination, there does not appear to be, at this time, a specific need for this reserve to be increased, and thus the sum of £50,000, can form part of the required funds that I'm proposing. Secondly, in respect of the allocation of £1,068,000 arising out of the new homes bonus, the sum of £746,000 has been allocated to the revenue budget and £200,000 to capital. Upon examination, there does not appear to be a specific need for the capital reserve to be increased, and this sum can form part of the required funds that is the subject of this proposal. I should mention that this still leaves £122,000 unallocated, along with another unallocated sum of £235,000 in respect of the new homes bonus. This unallocated sum still remains as in the report. And thirdly, there is in the proposed budget a business rate retention reserve of 5.6 million. Can I remind members that in this financial year, this reserve provided the sum of £343,000 for covering the budget shortfall, and also £243,000 was paid out of it to Fusion. I see no reason why in the next financial year the sum of £450,000 should not be, I see no reason why that £450,000 should not be used towards the two plans that are there to deal with the steps that Council needs to take to help our business and communities recover from the pandemic crisis, but also address the much needed action required on climate change and diversity. As such, I seek your support in recommending this proposal to the executive. Thank you. Councillor Mackay, do you want to say anything as the seconder?
Thank you. I haven't very little to add to what you've just said, which I think is very rational and makes a lot of sense. My obvious interest is in climate change, and I'd just like to draw members' attention to the fact that the £400,000 that's there at the moment, if spent over 4 years, represents about 1% of the budget, and I feel, given the importance of addressing climate change, that 1% it just is not sufficient recognition of the of what we're facing. So given the rationale that John has already put before you, increasing that 400,000 by 200,000 is a small step, but a significant step towards addressing that issue. I will also go on to say that the Recovery and Renewal Plan and the Climate Change Plan, whilst being considered as distinct activities, it really shouldn't be. And so the fact that more money will be available for the Recovery and Renewal Plan, I think, benefits both ambitions for the council. That's so I support this addition.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a matter of interest, did everybody else just suddenly get dropped out of the meeting? Doesn't sound like it. No, okay, because it just dropped again. Anyway, so I was just going to propose actually a slightly an additional amendment to this, which is that we add the unallocated 122,274 which is the unallocated new homes bonus budget. I mean, if that's just going to be sort of sitting in our reserves for a couple of years to see what the government may or may not do for that, I think, in terms of what we're talking about as being priority, and we recognise a climate emergency, then it's better to try and see how we can best invest that money. And what I was thinking was that I actually propose that we add that to the climate emergency budget for community projects. So in addition, so this would bring this 500,000 up to 622,274. It could be considered.
Councillor Hodgson, can I just say that I think that you'll have to deal with that proposed amendment once this has been dealt with. If rather than we can't do an amendment to an amendment. So
I think we can. I think a point of order, Chairman. I think we can.
Well,
can I intervene there, Chair? Because this isn't an amendment. This is an addition. This is a new part 2. If Councillor Hodgson does wish to put an amendment to that, she can, provided she gets a seconder, she can do.
So, Councillor Hodgson, what are you proposing?
That we add that this is, instead of it being, we allocate 500,000 for funding to the recovery. Sorry, to actually we add the an extra 122,274, which is the unallocated new homes bonus amount, to this amount for the climate emergency.
We need a seconder for that amendment to be debated, Chair.
Do we have a seconder? No. Okay.
No. Sorry, I pressed the button twice, and I'm prepared to second that. Yeah. Hello.
So, yeah. So, Mr. Watt, can I have clarification on this? This is I'm not clear on this as to whether or not this is this is a proposed amended recommendation. I thought we'd have to deal with this one first and then deal with any subsequent amendment to it if it is passed.
Can I get this? This is in effect, Chair, the new part 2 of the recommendation, which has been nothing else has been put on the table. So this is part 2 of the recommendation, which has been proposed and seconded as a new or additional recommendation. Therefore, if any amendments do come forward, they would be dealt with in the normal manner, Chair. So I think what Councillor Hodgson is seeking to do with Councillor McKay having seconded now is to amend, in effect, what is the motion on the table now.
Okay.
So can I seek clarification, please?
Yes, please go on. Yes.
Just from Darryl. I mean, because I'm still new to all of this. If this isn't passed, then we revert to the original amendment, I take it, or the original addition. Yeah.
That's correct, Councillor McKay.
Yeah,
If this,
okay,
we're now in the process now of debating the amendment, which is I've underlined, which is a revised figure in the second line. Once the amendment's voted on, then if it was to fall, we'd then revert back to the original £200,000 figure.
So I just didn't want to compromise the original one by supporting this. Okay.
Okay. Right. In that case, Mr. White, can you put the amendment to this on the screen so that it's clear?
I've done part, Chair. I've updated the figure, but I imagine Councillor Hodgson wants to put a little D, which is in effect to utilise the unallocated new homes bonus of 122,274. So I'll just add that in now. Thank you, Chair.
Could you do that? Add that in, and then it's clear. Councillor Hodgson, are you back in the meeting? I think you dropped out.
Chair, can we move to the vote?
No, I'm just. Yeah. Councillor Austin I'm waiting for Mr. White to complete the.
I'm in now. I mean, this is absolutely appalling. This is so critical.
Councillor Hodgson, could you please go on the mute, please?
Get you in by phone, would that be easier?
Please.
I don't care what.
Councillor Hodgson, could you go on mute, please? Right. Councillor Austin, I was waiting for Mr. White to complete the proposed amendment, yes, which is now on the screen. So,
Chairman, just for clarity, we're just voting on Councillor Hodgson's
yes
amendment. We're not voting on the whole additional. No, right. Okay, no. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got so we have the amendment put forward by Councillor Hodgson. It's at D, and it's been seconded by Councillor McKay. So if we could move to the vote, please. So all those in favour. So if you could go around, Mr. White. Oh, sorry, I've got a question from Councillor Chown.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to get Lisa Buckle's professional opinion on this, please?
Mrs. Buckle, would you like to answer that? Could you please just make a comment in response to Councillor Chown's question?
Yes. Can I clarify that is just a comment around using the unallocated new homes bonus of 122,000 for further funding for the climate change. So in response to that, I would exercise caution around that, because we have included in our modelling for 22-23 that we will have some funding from either new homes bonus or a replacement scheme to the tune of 546,000, and we have no certainty that we will have funding from a replacement scheme around that, and therefore the amount we've got unallocated from this financial year of the 235 plus the amount remaining unallocated from next year of the 122, I would recommend that we have that as funding for 22-23 to fund our revenue-based budget, because if we haven't got that 546, that's going to increase our budget gap from half a million to £1 million, and we've no certainty from the the government about what the replacement for the new homes bonus scheme is. I think we're working with a lot of uncertainty within our financial figures.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I move to the vote? Do I have 5 supporters to move to the vote?
Councillor Austin, could you please not, you can only speak with my permission. I've got Councillor Brazil, which is to speak.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think that that Jackie's amendment to these proposals that are up on the list is in the spirit of those proposals, and I'm very happy to support it. I think as a council, what we're in danger of doing is prioritising the council rather than what we should be doing, which is prioritising both the economic regeneration of the South Hams and support for local businesses, and indeed the climate change and biodiversity emergency action plan. And I think what the amendment and indeed the proposals before us do is it allocates specific funds to tackle those plans, because otherwise, as we've heard from Lisa, what we're in danger of doing is that all our reserves, all the funds that we've got in place, will be leached away in order to prop up the revenue budget. You know, I've already discussed about how we should be getting, you know, if they did the reforms that I said to council tax and business rates, we'd get in the region of £1 million extra revenue per year. So, you know, I think the responsibility of making sure that this council remains viable rests with the government. They can bankrupt us as if they want. Because they've got their own agenda, let them do it. But I think our responsibility is to businesses and the climate and the environment that we live here in the South Ham. So I'll be very happy to support all of these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Chairman, I believe we should move to the vote. Do I have 5 supporters?
Well, I'm just about to move to the vote, Councillor Austin, because no other member wishes to speak. So
I think I said comment in the box unless it's not showing.
Oh, sorry. We'll move to the vote after Councillor Callaghan has
Chairman,
made a
you are
contribution.
not sticking to
Councillor
the
Austin,
constitution of the council. I have just
Councillor Austin,
asked
you
to
don't
move
have
to
my
vote.
permission to speak. Councillor O'Callaghan.
This is outrageous, Chairman.
Councillor
I've
Austin, you
asked to
do
move
not
to the
have my
vote. Do I
permission
have
to
5
speak.
supporters?
Councillor O'Callaghan.
Sorry, is it appropriate for me to speak? I'm not sure
Yes,
now.
please.
Right. Yes, I just want to briefly endorse what Councillor Brazil has said. I'm happy to support this. I think the public wants to see us put our money where our mouth is, and to see us actually moving to enact what we keep talking about, and to actually do things like planting, mass tree planting, etc. That's what they want to see, rather than us just talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. As no other member wishes to speak to the amendment on the screen, I'll move to the vote. So, Mr. White, would you like to go around the members so they can indicate how they vote? And this is in respect of just item D, which is underlined.
It is, and also the revised figure at line 2.
Oh,
Chair.
yes, of course, yes.
So we're
Mr.
voting
White.
on the amendment, members only at this stage, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Abbott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Chown.
Abstain.
Councillor Hodgson.
For.
The whole way.
Against.
Jackson.
For.
Jackson.
For.
Councillor Camp.
For.
Councillor Long.
Abstain.
Councillor McKay.
For.
Councillor Callaghan.
For.
Panel.
4.
Councillor Pennington. Councillor Pennington.
Against.
Councillor Pringle.
Against.
Councillor Reeve.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
Against.
Councillor Smurden.
Against.
Councillor Spencer.
Against.
Councillor Sweet.
Abstain.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
That therefore, members, it's 10 votes in favour, 10 against, with 3 abstentions. So that is therefore over to you, Chair.
Right. It's I cast my as chair for the amendment.
Thank you. So therefore, that amendment is therefore declared carried, Chair, and is therefore part of the substantive motion. Thank you, members.
Right. So we now move on to a vote on the substantive motion. I've got Councillor Austin wishes to speak. Councillor Austin.
So I'd just like to raise an objection really to what just went on, and I'd like clarification from Mr. White on this. I asked to move to the vote. I asked for 5 supporters if we could move to the vote. The chair overrode me. He then allowed other people to carry on speaking. Can you clarify what is the correct procedure if a councillor wishes to move to the vote and asks for 5 supporters?
Can do. Thank you, Councillor Austin. So if a motion, the procedural rules are as follows. If a motion to proceed to next business is seconded and the chairman thinks the item has been sufficiently discussed, he or she will give the mover of the original motion a right to reply and then put the procedural motion to the vote. So I think the thing about 5 members speaking, I think, is more to do with recorded votes. But taking the point on that one, that actually after Councillor O'Callaghan did speak, there was no sort of vote to move the vote, if you like, and the vote was therefore taken thereafter, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify again?
Councillor Austin, you do not have my permission to speak. Your question has been answered, and we'll leave it at that, please. I've got Councillor Holloway, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's all very well, very fine words about doing all the things this council's here to do rather than preserving the council. And I think it's a nonsense, an absolute nonsense. If this council doesn't survive, it can't do any of the good works. There's an awful lot of work gone into this budget, and I think it's a very careful budget. And I think that's the only way to be until we see in the future whether or not there are any funds available to spend more on the various things. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sweet. Can I just remind members that we are now debating the recommendation on the screen. So Councillor Sweet.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair. I do support the recommendation on the screen. I abstained because actually it's quite difficult to process information with, when we're talking about large figures of funds. I've got, a child upstairs calling me down every 2 minutes for help with schoolwork. So having sort of interruptions and sort of, going to the vote and all this other kind of stuff, it's actually really, really distracting. So I would really like to focus on what's happening, and I really hope that we don't lose this this proposal at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Austin.
It's okay, Chair. I'd rather not speak.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Look, I have every sympathy with what Tom says, and to a certain extent, I agree with that. But I think what we're saying here is that this isn't really changing the budget much at all. What we're asking is that some of the reserves that we have in place here are allocated towards specific projects, and we heard about tree planting being one of them. I think that as a member of this council, what I'm very wary of is that we seem to spend a lot of money willy-nilly on various projects that don't come to fruition, and that's okay. Many of them not even supported by members, or outside of our remit. So I think, you know, what this is saying is we just want to put these reserves to projects that we want to get. So I hope members will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smurden.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's unfortunate so what is effectively, you know, this is quite a critical debate, that you know, additional proposals have been introduced, which members are, normally members would have a chance to consider these things and balance them out, you know, a day or a few days before. Members are effectively having to, you know, balance this out on the hoof, which I don't think is altogether fair. But I'm afraid, you know, I can't support the amendment. Mrs. Buckle's advice is clear. If we were going to, you know, to put money into anything additional, it should be going into a COVID reserve, in my opinion. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Is this working now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. If I disappear, it's not my fault, it just jumps. So, okay, yeah, I just wanted to just really say that I think, you know, it's really important to support the climate emergency plans, because, you know, apart from, you know, whether people buy into the whole project or not, the thing is it engages the community, and we've got a lot of people who are really, you know, sort of suffering out there. And I think as we emerge from this COVID crisis, I think, you know, getting involved in climate emergency actions, I think is a very, very holistic and positive thing. And I think this is why I feel very strongly about actually making sure we have adequate funds. And it's not, to be frank, it's not massive amounts of money, and it's not going, I think, you know, our believe our district council is secure, and the healthier our population is, and the more our residents that we represent work as a community, then actually, you know, the better the services work as well. So it's a very positive thing to invest in our community as well as the climate emergency. So I see it as a two-pronged thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I listened to the original presentation by Mrs. Buckle, which I thought was very good and very competent of her, as always. I actually want there to be a council here to do this very important work, both on climate change and the wider community. And I'm afraid I believe that this amendment is both fiscal and economic nonsense, and I certainly can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw a member's attention to the fact that this money is not just money that gets burnt. There is every opportunity for this money to actually generate money. And if it's spent wisely, and these projects, many of the green projects, I mean, one of the ones that I would like to push hard on is the covering of our car parks with solar panels. The revenue that could generate is not insubstantial, and it needs to be. It could well be a profitable enterprise for the council. So, just regarding this money as money that's being burnt away on climate change. Projects that may well bring benefit to the community, but is ultimately a drain on the council, is not the correct way to look at this.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really concerned about the amended recommendation that's on the screen. I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment that sits behind the recommendation, but the numbers that are being used have been plucked out of midair. There's no allocation of money to any specific projects. There's no demonstrable need for these monies, or nothing that's on the screen at least. So they're totally arbitrary amounts. And I think until there's specific plans for the additional funds that we're talking about, then this shouldn't go ahead. So I think we're travelling down the wrong path. Thank you.
Councillor Pennington.
Councillor Pennington.
I would just like to make one brief statement. We should be concentrating, it's common sense, on our main problem now. And our main problem is to overcome the COVID crisis and to put resources, if we can, into that without talking about climate change at this stage. It's not common sense. Do what we can with the most urgent problem, which is COVID.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Chair. It was helpful to have Mrs. Buckle's advice on the Councillor Hodgson's amendment. So would it be possible for Lisa Buckle to comment on the recommendation as a whole?
Yes, okay. Mrs. Buckle.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, with regards to the 700,000, that is a considerable amount of money. Technically, that's possible. It would be earmarking 700,000 of funding for the recovery and renewal plan and climate change, and funding it from one-off resources. Obviously, those figures have been updated now to 322,274 for the climate change action plan. I would perhaps be cautious about doing it now. We already have 380,000 in the climate change report. We have a budget, a capital budget, also of 337,000 for the Green Homes Grant capital funding government funds. What is being proposed in this budget is a one-year rollover budget to mirror the government's one-year rollover financial settlement. And in 4.30 of the report on page 22, we do set out that the council is preparing its corporate strategy for adoption in the summer 2021, and that will set out any additional resources requirements to deliver the strategy. I think we've been focusing on a budget for next year, which is very much a rollover budget, one-year rollover budget to mirror the government's one-year rollover assessment. There are still things that I accept that we are working on with regards to the corporate strategy. That will be for the summer, and we will come back at that point with the additional resource requirements to deliver that strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So there are no more speakers. Can I just say in response, and I have the right to speak as a result, as being the proposer, this is not just plucked out of the air. There were discussions with officers concerning this proposal, certainly the original proposal. And in fact, the fact of the matter is this, is that we still do have a balanced budget. In looking at the budget that Mrs. Buckle went through, one can find that there are what amounts to £1.25 million unallocated as such, but are being kept to a certain extent for unforeseen circumstances. For example, we're receiving from the government in April the sum of nearly £380,000 towards this is a sum we're going to receive from the government in April, and that is not accounted for within the budget. Secondly, when you add that 380 to the £100,000 that are already in reserves for the COVID emergency, in April we will effectively have nearly £500,000 reserved for the COVID emergency. So we need to bear that in mind. I just emphasize this is not a proposal that's been plucked out of the air and just put before members today. There's a lot of thought gone into this, and there have been discussions with officers. So that being the case, I'll move on to the vote. So Mr. White, would you like to...
Chairman, sorry, just for a point of clarity for myself and I suspect other members. so we voted on the agenda. We voted on item 1. We voted on that. We're now. This is item 2, which so this is an amendment to item 2. Can I ask Mr. White, does this item 2 replace item 3, 4, and 5
No.
that are on?
No.
So
Can I come in? This is a new. We've dealt with part 1. That's been done and dusted as per the report recommendation. This in effect is a new. This is in effect a new part 2, which is in red on the screen. So what will happen now, Chair, is that actually the two part 2 of the report recommendation will become part 3, and so on. 3 will become 4. With if this is recommended for approval, these figures will be reflected in the later recommendation. So this one's been taken at this point because it has an impact on the later recommendations. So this is just this is a new part 2.
Okay, so fine. So with regard to current number 4, which is the savings of 122,191, we just voted on that, and
that's to come.
That's to come, Councillor Smurden.
I thought was that not part of Councillor Hodgson's proposal?
No.
Right. Okay. Sorry,
Councillor Smurden. That depending on the outcome of this vote, will then determine the figures that will go in for the remaining items. Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. White, would you like to proceed, please, with the vote?
Thank you, Chair. So therefore, on substantive part 2, as per the screens, members, Councillor Abbott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Now.
Abstain.
Hodgson.
For.
Holway.
Against.
Jackson.
For.
Kemp.
For.
The Long.
For.
McKay.
For.
Councillor Callaghan.
For.
Councillor Pannell.
For.
Councillor Pennington. Councillor Pennington.
Against.
Councillor Pringle.
Against.
Councillor Reeve.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
Against.
Councillor Smurden.
Against.
Councillor Spencer.
Against.
Councillor Sweet.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
Therefore, members, is 12 votes in favour with 10 against and 1 abstention, and that part 2 of the substantive motion is therefore declared carried. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. White. So, could I ask that the remaining recommendations be put on the screen and amended to take into account what has just been passed, please?
Just give me 1 second, Joe. I've just had an email from Mrs. Buckle, which I'll just pick up and reflect.
Mr. White, what's the situation?
I'm just cross-referencing. I've had an email from Mrs. Buckle. I'm just cross-referencing her email to the slides, Chair.
Okay. Would you tell us when you're ready?
Okay. Mrs. Buckle, are you happy with that? That appears to marry up to the email you've just sent me.
Yes, if you could just move to the one prior to that, Darryl, that's okay. Yes, so on little 3, we've got utilising 200,000, and we also need to add on to that and where you've got the and before using 450 from the business rate retention reserve, you just need to add on and 122,274 of the new homes bonus funding unallocated in 21-22.
That one there, yeah. So what we're saying now is, Chair, that actually the little 2 on the screen now, which is the financial pressures shown, is now in effect the new part 3. So that's the one that, if we're doing it part by part still, Chair, that was the one I've just highlighted there, will be the one that is next on the list, if you like.
Okay, so members, the items, the old items 2, 3 and 4, which are now new items 3, 4 and 5, have been amended to reflect what was agreed a moment ago. Do you wish to debate those, or shall we move to the vote, or is it accepted that they reflect what has arisen as a result of the vote? So does any member wish to speak?
Daryl, can you, you've still got, you're still showing number 1, and because of that, all right, I see what you've done now. You've yeah, it's a shame we can't get them all on one screen.
Yeah, it's a visibility issue there, I think, Vice Chair. What we're focused on now is the ones I've highlighted, which are little part 3, little part 4 and little part 5, Chair.
Right, well, I think there's what I propose is that we vote, or we move to the vote. Sorry, Councillor Austin.
Sorry, we were asked at the beginning of the meeting if we could just use the chat box for questions. I'm not really quite sure what Councillor Hodgson is actually asking in that last comment she made.
I think she's responding to my request as to whether or not we should vote on the remaining items en bloc. I don't think she was making a comment. I think she was responding to what I said a moment ago. So that being the case, what I suggest we do is move to the vote on items 3, 4 and 5, which effectively reflect what was agreed a moment ago. So Mr. White.
Mr. Chairman, before we do, sorry, it's the Chief Exec here. I think we need to make an amendment to the figure in the first part of that. It reflects the 500 and the 200, but doesn't yet reflect the other 122 that was added by the motion you just passed. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. White, are you able to just bring up the one before? Sorry,
So
that one.
Yeah, that one's the one we've approved at part 2, Mrs. Buckle. Yeah.
Yeah. So in little b, that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's in D. Yeah. No, that's fine. Sorry, I couldn't see where the 1 to 2 was, but yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
That's a new part 2. So, but just double checking, Mrs. Buckle, that has no impact at all on parts 3, 4 and 5 that I've highlighted there.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Buckle, can you confirm that new 3, 4 and 5 tie up with what was agreed a moment ago?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman.
Okay, in that case, Mr. White will move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Is it your wish? So we take these 3 on block. Is it your wish that we do these by named vote, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, members. So Councillor Abbott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Chown.
Against.
Councillor Hodgson.
For.
Councillor Holloway.
Against.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kemp.
For.
Councillor Long.
For.
McKay.
For.
Councillor Callahan.
For.
Councillor Panel.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. For.
Thank you. Councillor Pennington.
Against.
Councillor Pringle.
Against.
Councillor Reeve.
Against.
Rowe.
Against.
Councillor Smurden.
Against.
Councillor Spencer.
Against.
Councillor Sweet.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
Thank you. That therefore, members, for parts 3, 4 and 5 as highlighted on the screens is declared carried by 12 votes in favour with 11 against. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to the new item 6, dealing with partnership funding. I'd like to propose bearing in mind the wording on the screen is different than that in the report. I propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Austin, I got you to speak. I think you've already spoke, was previously, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've already spoken, Chair.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Councillor Hodgson.
Fingers crossed this works this time. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's really important that we do continue to support the CVS. I thought this, was it Mr. Ward that spoke earlier on regarding their contribution during this particularly difficult year, and I think we need to recognise and welcome the fact that we've actually have managed to keep our support funding, albeit being whittled away each year. I mean, it was, I think, 25,000 when I first joined the council, so 10,000 isn't a huge amount, and I welcome the fact that they're also hopefully going to get some other grant funding. But yes, I definitely think that should be supported, so I do support this piece. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Do any other members wish to speak? If not, we'll move to the vote. Mr. White, would you like to go around the members and so they can indicate whether or not they support this item?
Thank you, Chair. So on part 6, as highlighted on the screens, members, Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Austin.
For.
Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Town.
For.
Councillor Hodgson.
For.
Councillor Holway.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
For. Oh.
Councillor Kemp.
For.
Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor McKay.
For.
Councillor Callaghan.
For.
Panel.
For.
Councillor Pennington.
For.
Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Reeve.
For.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Smurden.
For.
Councillor Spencer.
For.
Councillor Sweet.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
Members, that is therefore unanimous, and part 6, the recommendation is therefore declared carried. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. White. So if we could move on to item 8 of the agenda. Councillor Baston, can I ask you to introduce this report, the report in support of this, please?
Chairman, just a thought. You've been going for 2.5 hours. Whether your members would like a comfort break?
No, we'll get this out of the way.
Okay, I'm happy to carry on.
We've got another meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
All right, okay. This report sets out the proposals for changes to fees and charges for 2021 and 2022. Every year, charges are reviewed to ensure fees are set at a reasonable rate to recover all costs, including officer time where possible. In the current environment, but this needs to be carefully balanced against the economic and financial impact of COVID-19. No changes have been proposed for 21-22 to fees for parks, open spaces, outdoor sports, environmental health and planning applications and enforcement, as detailed in appendices A to C. The estimated additional income that could be generated in 21-22 from the review of fees and charges detailed in this report is £3,500. £2,000 in relation to boat storage, £1,500 from street naming and numbering. In addition, delegated authority is requested to set fees at a later date for the lower ferry and local land charges as detailed in the report. The co-author of this report, Pauline Henstock, is with us today. She's the Deputy 151 officer, as are ELT members, such as Cameron who is the Harbour Master at Salcombe. If you need more detailed information on those increases. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Baston. First of all, do we have any questions? No questions? Okay. I'd like to move the recommendation from the chair. That's the recommendation. There are 9 recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I'll second those.
Right. Right, as far as these are concerned, does any member wish to speak? No, if that's the case, we'll move to the vote. Mr. White, if you'd like to ask the members how they intend to vote, please.
Thank you, members. So therefore, we are taking the vote en bloc for parts 1 to 9 rather, of the recommendation as per the screen, members. Councillor Abbott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Birch.
4.
Dill.
4.
Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Chown.
4.
Councillor Hodgson.
4.
Councillor Holway.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Kemp.
4.
Long.
4.
Councillor McKay.
4.
Councillor Callaghan.
4.
Councillor Pannell.
4.
Councillor Pennington.
4.
Councillor Pringle.
4.
Councillor Reeve.
4.
Councillor Rowe.
4.
Councillor Smurden.
4.
Councillor Spencer.
4.
Councillor Sweets.
4.
Taylor.
4.
And Councillor Thomas.
4.
Thank you, members. That is therefore declared by unanimous vote carried for parts 1 to 9 of the report recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. White. Right, that is the end of the meeting. Thank you, members, and look forward to seeing some of you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thank you.